Look at his legacy. His legacy. How many young girls have died because of him? He's left a legacy that's important. We've never had a president. Andrew Jackson. Even Andrew Johnson. I know. You know what his job was working for his father's favorite veteran when he was a young kid? Redlining the neighborhoods. Oh, yeah. It's amazing who
You
grovels
don't want
back.
any water or coffee?
The Ted
No.
Cruz's.
Well, maybe some water.
They go to sleep themselves.
Guy Vance really turned over on his belly.
You know, in the back row here, in the back row on this side, on the aisle, there's a guy. And when I went to get my bagel this morning, I said, boy, that was some convention. He said, that was the best convention I've seen in a long time. That was great.
They celebrated his nominating speech as one of the worst speeches ever given.
This guy loved it. This guy sitting right back here loved it. He thought it was
Okay, here we go. Shabbat Shalom. So, you guys are part of a very elite group this morning.
The stormtrooper.
Torah studiers
that's us.
who are actually in Miami and don't have COVID. That's you guys and me. Unfortunately,
We went out to tour in every classroom.
you got one, huh? Unfortunately, there's a lot of COVID going around, so some of our people have been struck by it, so keep them in our prayers for a full recovery. Okay, here we go. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Bein Yevon v'nei Yisrael ot hi leolam oti leolam V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Uvayom hashvi shavat vaynafash shavat vaynafash V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen Amen l'chaim. Okay, and blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Torah portion this week is called Balak. It's one of the most interesting and funny and just awesome Torah portions. We're going to begin with chapter 22, verse 2. The Torah portion actually starts in verse 2 of Numbers, 22:2. What's Farber 1? Shabbat Shalom. Oh, okay, good. Hi. Shabbat Shalom to all our fans in New Jersey. Hi to everyone in the Berkshires, North Carolina, Colorado. Every once in a while, have someone in a class and you teach something about Torah that they didn't know. And they're amazed by it. And they say, how come I didn't know this? How does it? And I said, because that week, you didn't come to Torah study. Whatever, I don't know, what can I tell you? But today, I had a feeling this could happen. Everyone good? Okay. Today, I had a feeling this could happen because I'm going to show you something so incredible. And some people are going to miss it. And let's just keep it to ourselves. Because it's so cool that it's kind of one of those things, if you weren't there. No, it's okay. You can, if you see some. If they had COVID, then you can tell them. So I think you could maybe even say that the war that's going on in Israel right now, the answer is in this week's Torah portion. Why is it happening? It's all here. It's all been laid out. So you'll tell me at the end whether you agree or disagree. You can disagree. You always have the right to be wrong. But you'll see what you think. You'll see what you think. Now, before we get into it, does anyone know? Do we know who Balak is? The Torah is named Balak. Who is Balak? One guy lives down the street from Don, but besides that, he's also...
He's also a prophet.
No, that's Bilam.
Oh, Balaam.
Same Torah portion.
Oh, sorry.
He's the king.
He's a king.
He's the other guy.
He's a king. So Balak, now listen, there's a difference between Balak and Bilam. These are two characters who are both not Jewish that we're going to meet in this week's Torah portion. Okay? They're on the books over there. That's Bill's secret stash. Everyone have a sheet? Okay, if not, there's a whole bunch. The Jewish people destroyed Egypt, not through battle, but through God's miracles. Right? There was no fighting. There was the 10 plagues, and then there was the Red Sea, and then that was the end of the Egyptian army and the Egyptian people. Later on, when the Jews leave Egypt, they're attacked by another nation called Amalek, and this time there is battle. And over the course of the time that they're in the wilderness, from time to time, there are actual battles, and the Jews usually do pretty well. And then when they get to Israel, there's battles on every page. You know what's funny is people who are anti-war because of their Jewish values. So a good question is, well, what Jewish values are you talking about? Because in the Torah, there's war on every page. We're always in a state of war. And when you get to the Tanakh, the Nach part of Tanakh, once you start with Joshua, and you go Joshua through the books all the way through the end of the Tanakh, there's literally war on every single page. And a lot of the times, it's the Jews starting the war and God telling the Jews, go out to war. So when you're anti-war based on your Jewish values, it's fine. But a good question would be, which Jewish value is that? Or which, are we reading the same Torah? Okay, that's a whole other course. That's a whole other course, but it's something to think about because there's a lot of war in the Torah. And in this case now, Balak is the king of Moab. Moab is like where the country of Jordan is today, towards the south. A little bit south of Edom. Right? So if you've ever been to the Dead Sea, and you look across and you see Jordan on the other side, that's where Edom and Moab were. Okay? And a little bit further east were the Midianites. Now the Jews are coming around the other side because they're going to come through the Jordan River to get to Israel. So they're coming around, and they're going around, and they're going to come this way towards Israel. But there's people there. And the Jews are going to have to go through those people to get to Israel. And so some of them, they say, we just want to pass through. We're not going to bother you. We're not going to steal anything. We're just going to pass through. And if you allow us to go, great. If not, we're going to fight. And sometimes those people say, the Jews are coming, and we're scared of them, because if they took out Egypt, which is the world's superpower, they're going to be able to take out us. And so we're nervous about them. So Balak is the king of Moab who sees the Jews coming. And he says, I'm nervous that they're coming. I'm going to try to figure out a way to deal with them. And so what he does is, instead of going to war, he tries to hire this guy whose name was Bil'am. Bil'am was listen closely, a non-Jewish prophet. And if you look through, we're not going to read through the whole Torah portion, but if you look through the Torah portion, he's a non-Jewish prophet who speaks to Hashem. Not an idol, not the sun or the moon or making it up or, like the Egyptian sorcerers. He speaks to God. He's a real prophet. So the Midrash explains, how could this be? How could there be a non-Jew who has the same prophetic power as, or even a better prophetic power than some of the Jewish prophets? The answer is, so that the non-Jews don't say, if we had a prophet like you, we would have followed the Torah also. They did. Richard? Yeah. So, they didn't have the same powers as Moses, but he was better, a higher prophecy than some of the Israelite prophets. He was a brilliant prophet. But he used his prophecy to make money and to gain fame and power, not to be a speaker of God's word. Okay? Now, he is limited. He can only say what God tells him. And so when Balak goes to hire him, he says, no problem. I will work for you. You'll pay me. But I can only do what God says. So, okay, so that's what he did. Balak says, I'll take the deal because I need your help. Because I don't know how to destroy these people because I saw what they did to Egypt with the plagues, and I know they've got this powerful God, and I can't just fight them with soldiers. They've got other stuff going on. I need your help. So he hires him, he comes back, and every time he tries to curse him, a blessing comes out. And Balak says, you're not helping, you're hurting. And one of the blessings is, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob. We turned that into a song. You know Ma tovu? Now, Rabbi Greengrass mentioned Ma tovu last night in her sermon. She talked about what Ma tovu is. But what she didn't talk about, which I would have, had I been giving that sermon, is the Thai restaurant in Israel called Ma Tofu. It's a real place. It's a Ma Tofu. And I always think it's a shame. If you're going to talk about Ma Tofu, why not bring up Ma Tofu? Which, if you're interested in great Thai vegetarian in Tel Aviv, try Ma Tofu. Try Ma Tofu. How goodly is your tofu, oh God. Okay. All right. Now, the reason why I gave you all the history of this Torah portion without reading the Torah portion is because I want to focus on a different part of the portion that you've probably never focused on. Now, Balak is from, let's be very careful, he's from the country of Moab. He's the king of Moab. But before he attacks or goes to war with the Jews, he wants to create an alliance without looking. Who does it, not including Balaam, but a different country. Who does he want to create an alliance with? Midian. Very good. Midian. It's a very, very fascinating alliance, and we can learn a lot from it. So so now we're ready to get into it. If you look at the beginning of the portion, Ed, if you could, I turned that off. It may be on because it was getting feedback, which wasn't from that. So, okay. Oh, no, he's good. Okay, Genesis, Numbers 22:2. Here we go. Balak.
Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was alarmed because that people was so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this horde will lick clean all that is about us as an ox licks up the grass of the field." Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, in Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, "There was a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Come then, put a curse upon this people for me, since they are too numerous for me. Perhaps I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed indeed, and he whom you curse is cursed."
Oh, is that not on? Is it on? Is it red on the bottom? Is there? Oh, let's see. No, it's not on. Now it's on. Okay. They can't hear you in New Jersey. So if you're at home, we got the mic on. We just read through verse 6.
6.
Okay.
Right. The
Now,
good part.
a lot just happened in 2 through 6. So, first of all, verse 3, Moab was frightened of the people because it was formidable, and Moab was disgusted. Well, this is my translation. In other words, Balak, he really hated Jews. That may be impossible for you to believe, that there could be another nation that doesn't like Jews. You may never have heard of anything like this. That was a joke.
Won't be long.
Do you know, when I was in Fort Myers, for High Holy Days, we used to have the only time we ever had a policeman. It was like the only time we ever had more than 10 people together. But no, we had some people. But for Rosh Hashanah, High Holy Days, we'd have a cop come by. And the cop thought that we needed him because we had a lot of cars. He thought that he was there because people might be breaking into cars. And he said to one of our members, that's why I thought, but I was doing some research, and it turns out there are a lot of people who don't like Jews. And our member said to him, "Oh, you don't say. Really?" Yeah. So he came over to me and he said, "You worried about people breaking into cars?" I said, "No, I'm worried about someone coming up and blowing up the building." And then he got interested. Then it was like, "Oh, this is a cool assignment. I thought this was going to be really boring." So, all right, it turned out we survived. Anyway, this goes back a long time. People being frightened of the Jews, not liking Jews. And so what he does is he says, look at verse 4. Moab goes to the elders of Midian, and he starts spouting out propaganda. I want you to help me fight the Jews, so let me make up some bad stuff about them, and then you'll not like the Jews either. Right? They chew up their entire surroundings, all this stuff. Now, then he said, in verse 5, he said, there's this guy, Bilam, who can help us. Let's send messengers. Okay, so if you look now, why is this so interesting that Moab, of all people, would go to Midian? That's what I want to focus on today, for a little while anyway. The alliance between Moab and Midian, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. All right, but we need some midrash to help us understand why. So if you look at the first source, Rashi, Jeff, would you mind reading Rashi on 22:1? He said,
Okay. He said to his people, those two kings, Sihon and Og, on whom we relied, see Rashi on Numbers 21-23, could not resist them. How much less can we do so? On the account, because he said to his people, Moab, the whole people, was sore sore afraid? So afraid?
Yeah, sore afraid. Okay, so what does this mean? There used to be two other nations that were a buffer zone between where the Jews were and where Moab and Midian were. And that was Og and Sichon. Well, those two kings, who were stronger than Moab and Midian, were destroyed by the Jews. So they said, our buffer is gone. Now we better team up because the Jews are coming towards us. And everyone knows where the Jews are going. To Israel, because that's where they're from. Because they come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, Leah. And the land that they were promised, that everyone knows, is Israel. That's where they're going. Now, why is it so interesting that of all people, Moab would be willing to go to Midian? So I'll read the Midrash because I want to explain it as I go. But look at the Midrash says. So Moab said unto the elders of Midian, 22:4. And the Midrash says that verse is weird to us. We wouldn't have expected that. What is the relevance of mentioning the elders of Midian here? It is simply that they saw Israel conquering in a way that was not customary for conquerors. They said their leader Moses was raised in Midian. In other words, remember Moses married Zipporah, whose father was Jethro, who was a priest of Midian. You know these Jews. You Midianites know these Jews. You can be helpful to us. But there's more. Let us learn through them what his character is like. In other words, let us go talk to Midian and find out about Moses. And what was Moses' greatest power? Prophecy. He talked to God. So Moab said, if we're going to fight fire with fire, and their leader Moses is a prophet, you know what we need? A prophet. Do we know any prophets? Bilam. Enter Bilam. Do you see why they went to Bilam so far? Because they wanted to have what the Jews had, a prophet. The Jews didn't have a king. They're the only nation in the world that didn't have a king. Well, they have a prophet. So they said, okay, we need one of those. Okay, but there's more, and it gets better. So the elders of Midian said, his power is only in his mouth. They said to him, we will also bring someone who has power. So they went to get him. Okay. Now, here's the interesting part. Do you not find that the Midianites were at war with the Moabites? They hated each other. They were always at war with each other. They couldn't stand each other. So Moab goes to his enemy, Balak goes to his enemy, the Midianites, and says, help me fight the Jews. But he went to his worst enemy. It's a little strange.
The enemy of your enemy.
Right. Okay, so it is so stated, and then it tells you in the Torah where, do you not find that if you look in Genesis 36, and Hadad ben Hadad who smote Midian in the plains of Moab, and the Torah, it shows you in the Torah where they were doing battle, why they hated each other. Okay, listen to this. Moreover, the hatred between them had existed from time immemorial. They always hated each other. You know, if we were going now to war with, some country in South America, would we call Venezuela to help? You know, we're having a tough time with Venezuela. They may not they may not be interested in helping us. Why would Venezuela help us? If they too were threatened. If they said, these people you want us to help you with are a bigger threat to us than you are. So the Midianites said, yeah, we cannot stand you Moabites. We hate you. We're at war with you. But we're more afraid of the Jews. Right. The enemy of...
Your enemy is your enemy.
Right.
Is your friend.
At some point, they become your friend. All right. The matter is comparable to two dogs who were hostile to each other. When a wolf came against one of them, his companion said, if I do not help him, the wolf will kill this dog today. Then tomorrow he'll come against me. Therefore, Moab formed an alliance with Midian. So they hated each other so much, but the only thing they hated more than each other was Jews. Sound familiar?
We've seen this before.
So, that's what happens. Moab and Midian. You could say, well, that's just the Midrash, but the Midrash points you in the right direction and says, go back and look in the Torah yourself. Moab and Midian are battling with each other. They don't like each other. They never did. It's not that common in the ancient Near East that neighbors actually liked each other. I mean, everyone's fighting all the time. Okay. Now, a good question would be, who is Moab and who is Midian? Where do they come from? So if you remember back in the beginning of Genesis, there are lots of genealogies. We always skip them because they're boring. Right? Right? This guy begot this guy, who begot this guy, who begot this guy, and you say, really? Who cares?
Sounds like West Virginia.
But sometimes those names are interesting because they become somebody. There was a guy whose name in one of the genealogies, his name was Mitzrayim. You know what Mitzrayim means? Egypt. So, he became something of himself. Right? He had a country called Egypt. I heard this comedian who said he didn't believe that the Egyptians built the pyramids. Because they're really cool. And other than cotton sheets, the Egyptians haven't come up with anything in 4,000 years. And it's not believable. So then he said, maybe the Jews built them. But the Jews, he said, I think the Jews had the contract. But I don't know. Oh, anyway. So actually he said, how did you come up with pyramids? So one of the Jews had an idea that we don't want to work as hard today as we did yesterday. So he said, let's make this level a little shorter. It was the first ever pyramid scheme. Very good. We could go on the road. I got more material. This isn't the only stuff I have. I have some. All right. Now, if you look at the third source on the sheet, I just took 4 verses from Genesis to show you one of those genealogies. Okay. So, I don't know if you remember. Let me just set the stage here. Sarah dies, and Abraham's still alive, and Abraham remarries. And in Genesis 25, we find out who he remarries. Now, he already had another wife. Her name was Hagar. Hagar is the mother of Ishmael. Because remember, Sarah couldn't get pregnant. Abraham takes Hagar. They have a son named Ishmael. And Abraham hopes that Ishmael is like the most Jewish name ever. It's Shema El. Yishma is in the third person singular future. The one who shall listen to God. Yishma, Shema. He shall listen to God. There's like no more Jewish name. Yishmael. In fact, there's a famous rabbi in the Talmud named Rabbi Yishmael. But since Islam, it's not the most Jewish name anymore. But it was supposed to be. And it was Abraham's hope that Ishmael was going to be the one who would get the covenant after him. And then he worshipped idols. And so when God told Abraham Sarah's going to get pregnant and Sarah laughed, Abraham said, I don't need another son, God. I need you to fix the one that I got. He had hope that Ishmael could turn it around. And God said to him, it's not going to happen. It's not for him. You need a son through Sarah. Something wrong with Hagar. It's just not, that line's not going to work. It's got to be through Sarah. Okay, Isaac's born. By the way, Ishmael is who, the Muslims believe that they come from. And Esau is Edom, becomes Edom, right? Edom means red. In modern Hebrew, Edom means red. And red, Esau was red. Right? He had red hair, red skin. He was the Irish relative of the Jewish people. Now, do you know what the Jews said? So think about these two names, Ishmael and Esau. You know what the Jews said at Mount Sinai when God gave them the Torah? Two famous words. Say it again. Na'aseh v'nishma. What's na'aseh v'nishma? Now, Esau was the older brother. So Ishmael was the one that God thought was going to get the covenant. I'm sorry, that Abraham thought was going to get the covenant, and it didn't work out, so he went with Isaac. Esau was the one who was supposed to get the covenant from Isaac, because he was older. Not much, just a few minutes, but he was the older son. He was supposed to get the covenant. Esau and Ishmael were two guys who were supposed to get the covenant who didn't. Didn't work out for those two. When the Jewish people get to Mount Sinai, they say, Na'aseh v'nishma. Na'aseh, aseh, Esau. It's the same root. Nishma, Shma, Yishmael. We're replacing Esau and Ishmael. That's what they said at Mount Sinai. Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll accept it and we'll listen to it, means we're the ones who are actually going to follow it, not like Esau and Ishmael, who inherited it and threw it away. That's awesome, right? Don't tell that to the ones who didn't show up. This is like a bonus. It's like a summer bonus. I wasn't even going to teach you that today, but I wanted to give you, like, for showing up today, like a summer bonus, like extra credit. Yeah. What? Yeah, you get maybe an extra sticker. I love bonuses. You know what? So about 7 years ago, I taught a class at University of Miami, and I'm doing it again this year. So I'm going to teach this year, and what I realized was college has changed a lot since I went to college. It's probably changed a little bit since you guys went to college too. Now, when I went to college, we used to have these things called notebooks, and you could write notes and stuff. And those don't exist anymore. It's just computers. So it looks like the entire class is playing Battleship. That's what it looks like. They're all, and if you'd walk around, you'd see, like, wow, they're really typing. They must love what I'm doing. 80% of them are shopping, and 20% of them are on Facebook. But so what you do, some teachers have a rule: you're not allowed to have your computer open during class. So I'm going to be like a cool professor. I don't care what you do. But you could see that there'd be one kid on one side of the room and another kid on the other side of the room. They'd both laugh at the same time, and it's clear that they're chatting with each other. So what I would do, so I had 4 quizzes over the course of every certain amount. I have a quiz. So whenever I saw that they were chatting and laughing about something, whatever I was talking about at that moment that they weren't paying attention to, I put on the quiz. Yeah. Sometimes, and then I'd go back and see, there was a direct correlation between the kids who didn't pay attention during class and how they ended up doing on the... Unbelievable, right? All right. Anyway, I'm ready for them this semester. They're not going to believe what I got in store for them this semester. Turned out, though, I was a very easy grader. I didn't have the heart to give them the grades they deserved. Okay, now... back to these lines. So you could learn a lot about the nation later on by the line in which they came from. Right? I could tell you a lot about the people of Edom because they're named after Esau. Right? The rabbis in the Talmud, there's no nation they hated more than Edom. In fact, they believed that Rome became the Edomites. Now, if you were really getting controversial, you could say at Mount Sinai, when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, we're not going to be like Ishmael, we're not going to be like Esau. But who are the descendants of Ishmael? The Muslims. And who are the descendants of Esau? The Christians. Because Edom becomes Rome, and Rome becomes the Christians. Which is interesting, but that's a little much. I'm not, that's just for fun. I'm not really saying. All right. Okay, look at Genesis 25, the third source on the sheet. This is going to get interesting now, I hope. Huh. I'm getting texts from people who are saying, I'm telling everyone. All right. All right. Just don't tell them it was in my name you heard it. Tell them you heard it from Rabbi Klepi.
It's encrypted.
Yeah, you heard it from Rabbi Klepi. Or Rabbi Greengrass. Anyone but me. All right, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Now, Rashi will tell you that Keturah was Hagar. Now, you have a problem there. Abraham was married to Hagar, but they got separated. Is it permissible under Jewish law for them to remarry?
But they didn't have a Keturah. Or a get. They didn't have a get.
How do you know?
Which law?
Yeah, Abraham was married to Hagar.
I thought Sarah gave him to her when they weren't married, like concubine.
Yeah, but that's marriage. So listen, here's the thing. You're asking some good questions. You know too much to be dangerous at this point, because you're asking good questions. So here's what we believe, according to Jewish tradition. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, they knew the whole Torah, even before it was given. How? Because they were prophets, and God told them what all the mitzvahs were. One of the mitzvahs is there are 3 ways to get married. This is the beginning, a very famous section of the Talmud of Kiddushin, the tractate of Kiddushin, begins this way. There's 3 ways you can get married. Kesef, shtar, or bia. Kesef is money. Shtar is a writ, like a ketubah, but some sort of contract. Bia is sexual relations. That's enough to consummate the marriage. So they were married. Abraham had more than one wife, and his wife now was Hagar. But they got divorced. He sent her away. Right? That's in the Torah. He sends her away. Sarah makes him, and he does, and they go off. But now she's back. According to Rashi, does everyone agree that Keturah is necessarily Hagar? No. But do most people think that it probably is, including Rashi? Yes. Here's the catch. According to Jewish law, you're allowed to take back someone that you've previously been married to on one condition. That condition is that person hasn't had relations with anyone else all that time. How do you test that? I don't know. But yeah, the sota. But they were divorced, so she's permitted to. She's allowed to. So you can't test her of being a suspected adulteress. It's not adultery because they're divorced. But the fact that they tell us that she was never with any other man all that while means that Abraham could remarry. Okay, it doesn't really matter. For the purposes of this discussion, what I want to show you is when Abraham remarries this woman, when Abraham marries Keturah, whether it's Hagar or not doesn't matter. Look what happens in verse 2. They had some more children. It wasn't just Isaac and Ishmael that came from Abraham. Same thing with Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, and Midian. Ishbak and Shua. Now, when you go to brisses, these are not common names. You don't hear, I want to be the son of Abraham. How about, Isaac, Zimran, right? It's not a common Jewish name. But Midian is a guy who comes from possibly Hagar, the same as Ishmael, who God already told Abraham, that woman's line will never, be with your line. It's not going to work. Now, look what happens. The next, I skipped verses 3 and 4 because we didn't need them for these purposes. But in verse 5 and 6, we find out what happens to Midian compared to Isaac. This is fascinating. Abraham willed all that he owned to Isaac. Now, if you don't read verse 6, you might think that in verse 5, every possession that Abraham had went to Isaac, right? Because it says all that he had went to Isaac. But then he's going to say, except for the stuff that didn't. Because look at verse 6. But to Abraham's sons by concubine, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living. And he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east, which ended up becoming a place called Midian. Okay, now, what is it? This is exactly where game shows got the idea. This is parting gifts. This is where parting gifts come from, right? You know, it's like the guy standing next to you just won $482,000, a boat, and a TV. And you're walking away with nothing. Okay, so here's a gift card to Applebee's and $150. Right? That's called parting gifts. And you have to pay taxes on that gift card. Right? Yeah. But these other guys, some of this is funny stuff. I don't know if you're not appreciating it, but some of this is good material. What are these gifts? Rashi, next source. Our rabbis explained in the Talmud, in a tractate called Sanhedrin, that so this is going to say, he transmitted to them the names of impure things. All right, forget that. Another explanation is better. All that he received as gifts because of Sarah, he gave to Isaac. And the other gifts that people had given him, all these gifts he gave to them because he didn't want to derive any benefit from them. So, Abraham was a famous guy. And he was a very important person. He was a very powerful person. And kings used to hire him to help fight in wars. We see that, different places in Genesis. And so Abraham, as a powerful guy, he'd go visit the king or the mayor of whoever, the king of Sodom, whatever, and he'd give him a gift. And it might be something nice and valuable. Abraham didn't want that. What is the gift, though, that he gets from Sarah? It's not so much a gift as it is something that he shares in common with her. And that is that they have the gift of prophecy. Now, what's prophecy? Prophecy means that when you give someone a blessing, it comes true. You could come to my office and I could give you a blessing, and that and 50 cents, maybe I'll get you a cup of coffee. Who knows? Who knows if it's going to be worth anything? Maybe it will, but I don't have the power of prophecy. I bless you. What does that mean? Like any person, you can go to the Pope and ask for a blessing. A big deal. But you go to Abraham and ask for a blessing, it's going to come true. If it's not going to come true, he wouldn't give it because he's a prophet. He can see what's going to happen. That's what prophets are. So Abraham and Sarah have this gift of being able to give blessing to the next generation. You know who doesn't get that? Midian. You know who doesn't get that? Ishmael. They get trinkets. They're very nice. They get some beads. They get a totem pole or whatever. And they move to the east side of the Jordan River. But that's all they get. Okay, now that's Midian. If you would now jump back with me to Genesis. I didn't put these on the sheet, but you got to see this. Genesis 19. If anyone has it, if you could shout out the page number. First one to find it wins. Gift card to Applebee? No. Genesis 19. $129 in Plout. Okay, now we need verse 30. 1930.
132.
Page 132. Scott, do you have it? Would you mind reading verse 30?
Lot went up from Zoar, that one?
Yeah.
Lot went up from Zoar and settled in the hill country with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar.
Okay, so let me just set the scene where we are. Remember Lot?
Yes.
Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Now, who's Lot? Lot is this guy who lives by Sodom. He doesn't live in Sodom. If you remember, he lives at the gate of Sodom. And he does business with them. He doesn't want to live with Abraham because he doesn't want to live up to Abraham's standards. So Abraham comes and says, or the angels come and say, we're going to destroy Sodom, you come with us. Remember this story? So they destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and the only people left are the angels. And then they leave. And the whole world looks like a nuclear holocaust. And Lot thinks that everyone else in the world is dead. And his two daughters think that everyone else in the world is dead. Except maybe Abraham, but they don't want to live with Abraham because then they're going to have to, can't eat cheeseburgers and they're going to have to follow all the mitzvahs and they don't want to. Lot's the guy who can't live up to Abraham's standards and doesn't want to be with Abraham, even though he's his nephew. So the daughters say, this is the end of the world. How else are we going to procreate? How are we going to keep the world going? Okay, so that's where we are so far.
And he and his two daughters lived in a cave. And the older one said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to consort with us in this way of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father. That night they made their father drink wine, and the older one went in and lay with their father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she rose. The next day the older one said to the younger, see, I lay with father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go and lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father. That night they also made their father drink wine, and the younger one went and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she rose. Thus the two daughters of Lot came to be with child by their father. The older one bore a son and named him Moab.
Okay. Who's Moab? Moab's the guy who comes from Lot and his daughter. So now we come back to Balak, and we have two countries, Midian and Moab, who both come from Abraham's family, but in ways that they don't fit in with Abraham's family. By the way, why is he named Moab? You know how to say Ab? Oh, I just gave it away. But how do you say father in Hebrew? Abba.
Abba.
How do you say from? Meh. If you put the letter meh in front of a word, it means from. Moab means me'av, from the father. Because she had a relation, that's Moab. It's not the most creative name. But that may not have been his name. It probably wasn't his name. It's what the Torah calls him so that you remember that this nation of Moab came from this bizarre relationship that never should have happened and that is technically impermissible and can't be Jewish. Because Jews aren't allowed to do that. Okay. By the way, non-Jews aren't supposed to do that either, but whatever. That's one of the Noahide laws, is illicit relationships. Okay, so now Midian and Moab, they hate each other. They also hate the Jews. So you could ask the question, why would they hate the Jews? They never met the Jews. There were no Jews. When they were setting up their country, there were no Jews. The Jews were just a family. It was just Abraham's family and Isaac's family and Jacob's 12 sons. And when they were the 12 sons, and that's it, just one family, they went down to Egypt. And they stayed there for 210 years. And that's where they became a nation. Well, now they're coming back. But as a nation, they were never there in the first place. Moab and Midian had never met a Jew at this point. But they remembered, they're our family. We come from the same family. But they're the family that got the blessing, and we're the ones that didn't. So what do we, Moab and Midian, have in common? We have a bone to pick with the Jews because they got what Abraham had, and we didn't. Because we come from Ishmael and Lot, and they are the ones who never got what Sarah had. We're part of the group that got the parting gifts. And what's our parting gift? We're over here on the east bank of the Jordan. They're going to get the west bank, which, by the way, the west bank turns out to be kind of annoying. 3,000 years later. But they're going to get Jerusalem. And we're not. We're over here. We don't get it. Because we didn't inherit what Sarah got. We didn't get the blessing. This is incredible, right? Okay, so now, if you come back to Numbers with me. Numbers 31. So, by the way, the end of the story, let me just say a couple words about the end of the story, and then I'll tell you one thing that hopefully will put this all together. The end of the story is Bilam is hired to curse the Jews, and it doesn't work. And at the very end of Bilam ends up cursing the Jews in a way that works and almost defeats the Jews. Because what he tells them is, there's nothing I can do to hurt the Jews because God's protecting them. But he gives Balak and the Midianites, the Moabites and the Midianites, a very interesting piece of information. He says, I can't hurt them, but they can hurt themselves. So if they make their God mad, then God will let them be punished, or will punish them himself. You Moab and Midian, there's nothing you can do to hurt the Jews, unless God lets you. And the only way God will let you is if they're sinning and they deserve to be punished. So he gives them this idea that says, get all your beautiful Midianite women. Apparently Midianite women were better looking than Moabite women. They got the beautiful Midianite women, and they said, get them to go out and seduce the Israelite men. And say to the men, we'll only have relations with you if you bow down to our idol first. And they do. And the Jews come, and they do that, and God gets furious with them, and there's a plague. And thousands of Jews die, until a guy named Pinchas, who's the name of next week's Torah portion, comes and kills a Jewish man and one of the Midianite women who were doing this and bowing to the idols, and he kills them both in front of everybody, and the plague stops. And then next week's Torah portion is Pinchas and so forth. So that's how the story ends. But looking it forward to the end of Deuteronomy, look what happens in chapter 31, verse 5. Sherry, would you mind reading? I'm sorry, Numbers. I'm losing. Numbers 31, 5.
Okay. So there were delivered from the thousands of Israel, 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for the legion. Moses sent them, 1,000 from each tribe for the legion. Them and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the Kohen, to the legion, and the sacred vessels and the trumpets for sounding in his hand. They massed against Midian, as Hashem had commanded Moses, and they killed every male. They killed the kings of Midian along with their slain ones, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian, and Balaam, son of Beor, they slew with the sword.
You see that? They killed Balaam too. So that's the story. But God says, all right, Balaam and you Midianites, you caused the Jews to sin against me. So I punished the Jews because they sinned. And the ones who sinned died, and the rest of the Jews repented and stopped doing that. But now we're coming for you because of what you did. And they go and they slay the Midianites, and they kill Balaam. And a lot of people wonder whatever happens to Balaam, because at the end of this Torah portion, we don't hear anything about him. But if you look later on at the end of Numbers in chapter 31, the Jews find him and go ahead and kill him. Now, let's put this all together. Now that we know why Moab hated the Jews, and now we know why Moab got Midian to join the fight, and we sort of know from the Midrash why they hired Bilam to do the fighting, and that is because, and this is like the simple version of it, what's called the pshat, the basic understanding. Now we know that they hired Bilam because the Jews' main weapon was Moses, who was not a warrior, he was a prophet, and his power came from his mouth because he could say what God said and be accurate. We need one of those. So now we know all of that. But there's a deeper lesson and meaning. A deeper meaning and maybe a lesson. So the deeper meaning is this. The Jews had what we learned Isaac got. The Jews have what Isaac got, which is what he got from Sarah and Abraham, which is prophecy. Moab and Midian, they didn't get the prophecy. They got the parting gifts, the trinkets, the clothes, whatever. And what they realized is, if we want to be the Jews, now why would they want to be the Jews? Because they wanted to inherit Jerusalem also. Because everyone knew that where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, that was God's mountain. And that's the power in the world comes from there. And that's what they believed. And if you look at any picture of a Hamas terrorist or a PLO terrorist or any one of them, in the background is a picture of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Because they also believe that that's where the power comes from. And that's what the war's about right now. It's about Jerusalem. It's about who has the power, who's controlling the land of Israel. Yeah.
I read somewhere that the Muslims have a holiday of the sacrifice. Only it's Ishmael that Abraham takes up, and it's the exact same story.
So I'm not a scholar of the Quran,
I'm just
but
saying that.
yeah, right, of course.
How do they fit in and everything? They know Abraham is their father too.
Right. Well, so they said, look, here's the Torah, here's the story. It's a lot older than us. So we're going to change it. And here's the new story. Here's what actually happened. Oh, okay. That's Islam. So, but the original, like in the original version, it was Isaac. Right?
This is a sequel.
But listen closely. If we want to have that, if we want to have Jerusalem, and and we Midian and we Moab are missing the one thing that Jews have that are going to allow them to have that, we need it too. And what is it that was missing? The gift that Abraham gave to Isaac, prophecy. So if you have everything you need, except that, you hire Bilam. The whole point of this Torah portion is to point out that the other nations realized all the way back then that the Jews had the gift of prophecy and the blessing of the next generations, and they didn't. And because of that, they couldn't inherit the land of Israel. And that's what all this is about. And we've been fighting about it ever since. So who's Moab and Midian who hires Bilam in this week's Torah portion? What's this whole Torah portion about? These are two of the people who never bought in on the ground floor to prophecy. They weren't interested in prophecy. They wouldn't have been able to say Na'aseh v'nishma. They wanted all the benefits of the relationship with God without having to do the work of following the mitzvahs. And what the Jews said is, what do you think we've been doing for the last 210 years while we were slaves? And then we came out, we didn't say to God, you left us there to be slaves, and this is how you treat us? After we left, we said Na'aseh v'nishma, and God said, these people really do want to keep this Torah. You guys could never keep the Torah. And because you're not willing to keep the Torah, there's no point for you to be in the land. Because the whole point of the land is to be the place where the Torah is kept. So you're going to be on the east side, and we're going to be on the west side. And for a long time, they haven't appreciated that. So, okay, that's the story of Bilam and Balak. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
You want to tell the story, you can keep it.
good week, buddy.
Yes, you too, Bill. I'll Marshall.
We're doing the best we can. All right, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. You're not going to win. Yeah, you know something? And nowhere does it say that we're the only people of the land.
No, anyone can live there, but
They have to live by
they have to
live by Torah.
become what's called Ger Toshah, resident aliens, and follow Torah.
I guess for modern Judaism, they want to know where the prophets were.
Muslims would be okay because they worship one God. Christians would have a problem with the Trinity.
Yeah. But the problem that most modern Jews have is if there are were prophets, why didn't they prophesize the Holocaust? Why didn't they prophesize the Inquisition?
So I think it is all. I think it is all there. You
You
just have
think
to
so?
find it.
I like to find it.
I have. You ever been to the class? I show the Queen Esther predicted the Holocaust.
Really?
Have I shown you that?
No, I'd like to see that. Book of Esther?
In Esther, yeah. I mean, you have to do some digging,
Digging.
but it's there. It's pretty clear. She gave the and the reason Esther is because the Nazis are descendants of Haman, and the Talmud actually says that the Germania will come from Amalek. It's actually in there. It's in the tractate of Megillah. I can show you that prediction.
By the way, Daniel's was invited to go with the AJC to Germany
Oh, really?
in December, or before school starts.
He's a rising star.
I'm telling you. You know, he's Brown's representative at APAC.
That's awesome. He's great. Tell him I said hi.
I will.
I have the same experience
Oh.